So what has the African American community or the diaspora community, what have they provided in contrast to the Chinese, to the Arabs, to the Russians, the Europeans? Really nothing, and I think that one of the
Can I
main
answer the question? Can I answer the question?
yeah yeah yeah
Or was
yeah
that rhetorical in nature?
go ahead, yeah, answer the question.
Okay. So I think the argument of have African Americans provided the same level of material support as individuals from other nation states? The obvious answer is no. However, the devil is in the details, right? So the
Mm-hmm.
reality of the situation, we're talking about individuals that are backed by a nation state. Then we're talking about African people who are living under a repressive, anti-black government in the so-called own country. So I don't think that is an apples to apples comparison there.
I've lived here in East Africa for 5 years. I've spent time with government officials. I've interviewed a lot of people in terms of, like the Binuro Qatar Kingdom here in Uganda. I've interviewed kings, and what they tell me is that there are opportunities for investment and for building, nation building, but a lot of people just aren't aware. And when I say people, I mean the diasporan community. They're not aware of these opportunities, but the Chinese are aware, the Indians are aware, um, the
I understand
Europeans.
that, but once again, going to my previous point, these individuals, and Brother Dwayne, you're the resident historian here, the aficionado. You could correct me if I'm wrong. These individuals are not only backed by the government, but oftentimes employed by the government to do so. So, like I said, it's not an apples to apples
Yeah,
comparison.
actually, I'm going to jump in and answer that question as well as what the diaspora has done from the continent. And Lumumba is correct that when we look at the diaspora contributions to the continent, we have to keep in mind that these are oftentimes individuals, not people who are backed by a nation state, but these are individuals making contributions to the continent while also waging a struggle in the United States as well. So the thing that comes to my mind when we're talking about what has the diaspora, particularly African Americans, done for the continent, we could look at Ethiopia, where you had brothers and sisters in the United States actually volunteer to go and fight for the Ethiopians against Italy. You could look at South Africa, brothers and sisters in the United States back the struggle against apartheid there, even at a time where the United States government was supporting the apartheid regime in South Africa. Guinea-Bissau is another example. Amilcar Cabral had connections to Black Americans who were supporting his struggle against Portuguese imperialism, particularly the Black Panther Party. So keep in mind, the Black Panther Party is supporting Cabral's struggle. At the same time, the Black Panther Party is dealing with repression from the state in the United States. And the fourth example I will give, which really illustrates why having a nation state behind you is so important, there was a African-American businessman named William Ellis who was working to make a business arrangement with Menelik of Ethiopia. The United States government actually stepped in to push him out of whatever deals was being made between him and the Ethiopian government, because the United States government didn't want African Americans to be making independent arrangements with independent African nations at that time, because keep in mind that during this particular time period, Ethiopia is the only independent African nation. There's also Liberia, but we can get into the history of why Liberia wasn't really truly independent. So this was a situation where the American government is actually stopping African American businessmen from making arrangements with an African state. So what I will say is, given the constraints that the African diaspora has had, I think Black Americans have made important contributions to the African struggle, even given the type of struggles that Black people in the States have faced as well.
I think we would have to look at a Black American history to really pull the tangibles from. Because if we talk about the current, then I'm gonna be like, that's a different conversation. But I think there's the brother just Dwayne said it. Dwayne said just now that the history is there. So yes, those were some great things. And I think also a petri dish. I like to look at a lot of people's experience as a case study on how do we study what they went through and see, because tend what we hear on the continent, man, if we had money. And Black Americans, we got a good amount of money, but it goes to show that even if you have some capital, doesn't mean it gives you the keys to success. And so I think what we need to do, especially as Africans on the continent, is one, it needs to be done by Africans for Africans, and they need to lead the way for sure, because the nation state thing that Dwayne talks about is real. and you need to have those backings. Even if you're a private company, sometimes those private companies, definitely in place like China, get backing from a government. And the same thing as America, so don't get us wrong. You know what I'm saying? Like, if America breaks Ukraine off, it's definitely American companies that are, it comes from the government back to American private businesses. So I think, like I said, that's a good point. I think it said definitely from the past, like Brother Dwayne said, but that was when people were more politically astute and geopolitically astute. And it was those specific groups that led to kind of, information and taught everybody else, like, hey, man, this is why it's important. Because people on the block was like, why are we worried about Vietnam? He's like, because of this. And they're like, oh, okay, I see. They connected the dots. And so, yeah, I would say that came from it. But the diaspora, oh, man, that's different. Because if you go down to Brazil, their struggle or where they're at is vastly different than what America was. Because as we were hit with segregation, they were hit with integration to kind of integrate them out of existence. And so it's like a total flip. You're like, wait, what's happening here? And so, man, yeah, that's a different conversation. But yes, they're not even in the conversation. And they do have energy to be in the conversation. They hope and desire to see a place like Africa one day, but it's so far away from them because they don't have the economic, at least, stability as some Black Americans do. So, they would love it, though. Africa is definitely, I would say, an untapped Black market for Africa to actually mechanize. And they really desire it, but, it's just not there.